Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning Spread with your host, Mark Henry Jr. You can follow me on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. NFL, coming to you live from the Eagles Pin Pull YouTube network and live on Twitter as well. And we've got a very special guest for you guys today. We've got my friend Anthony Dabbundo from The Ringer. You could check him out over on Twitter at Anthony Dabbundo, as spelled right there on your screen right there, and check out everything he's doing over there with the Ringer Gambling Show, the Philly Special. It's been awesome checking out all of Anthony's stuff. Been Twitter pals with him for a long time. So him in there with cousin Sal, in there with House, it's awesome to listen to. And thanks so much for coming on, Anthony. How we doing?
Doing well. Excited to be here. Certainly excited for another week of NFL football. I think it's a fascinating time in the NFL, really, because of all the parity we've seen, right? Like nobody has really separated themselves at this point in the year. And it's a fun debate. Like, who are the three best teams in the NFL? You could get maybe 7 or 8 different teams in that mix. So it's been a fun start to the year.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and we're going to kind of go through some of the spreads for this week. But I want to start right there with some of the parity. And for those who don't know, Anthony is a Colts fan, and normally I would look at a team like the Colts, 5-1, Daniel Jones, the Reclamation Project, going really well here through 6 weeks. Obviously, better than anyone could have anticipated or hoped. But I think I would normally look at that team with, I think, a healthy dose of skepticism and saying, we'll see what happens down the stretch. And I don't know how seriously I take this with the top contenders of the conference, but you look around the conference and who are the top contenders? Whereas on the NFC, I think I was talking with a couple buddies last night. I think there's 6 teams. If I ranked my top 6, very little separates 1 through 6 in the NFC. And I could see any of them going to the Super Bowl if things broke right. Whereas the AFC, it feels like you really have to squint. So I'll frame it to you this way. Your Colts, how much are you buying this in terms of them being a potential real deal contender in the AFC?
I kind of buy them more longer term than I do right now. With the corner injuries, and I think Kenny Moore is going to play. It looks like on Sunday, but Kenny Moore, Charvarius Ward, Jalen Jones, the lack of a true top end pass rush. I do think the defense is a little bit limited, but I think schematically, I've liked what I've seen from the defense, if that makes sense. So I think that they've had a clear upgrade at coordinator, and that if they get healthy, and maybe if they make a splash move for a pass rusher, cough, cough, Trey Hendrickson, then maybe we might be having a different conversation about this defense. But, offensively, I think people are just kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I think, certainly right now, offensively, the Colts' 2 best point per drive comparisons are the 07 Patriots and the 13 Broncos, which were the 2 best offenses of the century, basically. So do I think they'll keep that up? Certainly not. But I don't really think if everybody's healthy, there's a case against this offense really being one of the best in the league. If you look around the skill group, tight end, running back, good complementary skill receivers, the O-line's healthy and mauling. It's very easy for Daniel Jones, to be quite honest, to just kind of point and shoot and play this offense at a high level. So right now, I was asked this week, where do you have the Colts rated? I said 8th. I think if they were healthier, they'd be closer to 5th or 6th in the NFL for me. But I think it's pretty sustainable. Like all the stuff they're doing, it's not, you look through their entire profile, you don't go, uh-oh, or what's going on here, or that's weird, or this is fluky. Like they lead the league in yards per drive, points per drive, point differential, first down success rate. Like they're just always ahead of the chains and always moving the chains and always scoring touchdowns. So what is there to complain about at this point?
And with how good Jonathan Taylor looks, it's very similar to some of the Eagles, offense last year, where him breaking those explosive runs makes everything so much easier. So just, you mentioned that you had them 8th on the power rankings. They'd probably be a little higher. I imagine the Chiefs are probably above them in the AFC on that list. Is there any other how many other teams from the AFC do you have kind of slotted above them as of now? Is Buffalo still up there?
They are, yeah. I still have Chiefs, Bills 2-3. Buffalo's a little bit of a gap between them right now. Buffalo is closer to 4 than they are to 2 and 1 for me. I have Green Bay number 1, which a lot of people didn't like. And
I agree with you.
I tweeted earlier in the week, and I said Green Bay, KC, Buffalo, Detroit, and then I had the Rams 5th in mind. So yeah, I have the Colts right now, 3rd in the AFC, which is hilarious. Of course, Baltimore is a little bit of a weird situation. Yeah. I suspect, like the Ravens' ceiling is obviously still higher than the Colts this season, but I think we're a long way from seeing that potentially this year. So, I had them, 3rd in the AFC. I will say, With regards to Buffalo, I get all the criticisms, but I don't know, maybe it's a little recency bias. We just watched them lose a couple games in a row, and now we're like, oh no, what's wrong with Buffalo? They did this last year. They started 3-0. They were dominating. They had that incredible performance against Jacksonville on Monday night. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, Buffalo. Then they had a couple bad games. They lost to Houston. They got mauled by Baltimore, and everybody's like, oh, yep, Buffalo's cooked. And then sure enough, like Buffalo's going to be there in the end. I'm pretty confident. I think they have the same flaws. Like if they go up against Mahomes again, Mahomes will probably just pick apart their secondary, but they're going to be in the mix. And so I think people are reacting to move them down. And then Green Bay, I had them number one. I get why people were a little like, I don't know, because we all watched. I think the one game everybody watched for Green Bay since week 2 was the Dallas game, right? Not, they saw, oh, they lost to Cleveland, they suck. They kind of struggled a little bit with Cincinnati, they suck. But the Dallas game too, right? So they gave up 40 points to Dallas. Their defense has had one bad game all year, and it was against the league's basically hottest quarterback in Dak Prescott. So I'm not really reading too much into, everybody's allowed to have bad games. Everybody's going to have bad games as part of the league. So I think that the one stat I like for Green Bay, they are number 1 in explosive play rate. They are number 2 in explosive play rate allowed. So the way that they're able to create explosives and prevent explosives, it's very similar to what the Eagles did last year on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, the Green Bay's been my pick since before the Parsons trade to win the Super Bowl, so I've kept riding with that. And I think people are acting like they're like 3-3 almost when you listen to certain podcasts, but they're 3-1-1, and I think they could very easily have a better record than that, and they're still the favorites to win the NFC. But my big take, and I tweeted it out last night, I think there are 6 teams in the NFC that very much can win the Super Bowl. And I think a lot of people would say 5. And I have the top 5 in odds on that list. And Green Bay plus 400, Detroit plus 425, Philly plus 600, the Rams plus 650, Tampa plus 750. Where I disagree and where I push a team up that I think should be in that top 5 is Seattle. Okay. I look at Seattle and I think they're a real deal legitimate contender, and DVOA has them. I haven't checked recently, but I think they're number 1 by like a pretty good margin in DVOA. I look at Seattle, and obviously Sam Darnold's the thing that you kind of are always going to be concerned about when we get to the big moments in the playoffs, and does he turn into what he turned into at the end of last year for Minnesota? But the run game isn't even working yet for Clint Kubiak. I think that's going to get going. I'm really bullish on that defense ever since before the year. There's so many young guys that it feels like you get 2 or 3 breakouts, and they've gotten some early in this year on defense. Then that defense really levels up, which I think is happening and going to continue happen down the stretch. JSN's turning into a legit, top 5-ish guy at wide receiver. I just think they kind of have all of the ingredients on a team I'm willing to buy in on. And Seattle's actually down at plus 1,400. If you look at it in odds, they're 8th in odds in the NFC. I think they're right with the Rams, the Eagles, the Bucks, and all these other top teams in the NFC. Am I crazy?
No, I don't think so. I mean, like, would I be shocked if Seattle won the Super Bowl? Like, yes, I would. Ultimately, but I think they're good enough to be in the mix. They're good enough to be like +3 in a road playoff game at LA. Right? Like if that were to come to it. And at that point, like you're in with a chance. And like, yes, I do think they're probably not going to, win the NFC ultimately, but I agree. The gap's not that big. I mean, Aaron Schatz was tweeting about this earlier this week. He had them as one of the best 4-2 teams ever. Now there's some noise in that because they had that one crazy outlier game against the Saints with all the special team stuff. But I mean, I was really bullish on Seattle coming into the season. One, I like Mike Macdonald a lot. I think he's a smart guy. I think he's a sharp mind. But it was the coordinator hire. That was the big difference. I mean, Ryan Grubb last year, the hire did not go well. It was very evident after like 3 weeks, like this wasn't going to be great. And then this year, just a clear upgrade in coordinator. People talk about the 2024 Saints, and like I know a lot of people were throwing them around early in the season, like, oh, beware, that could be a mirage. It kind of gets a little bit skewed on what the 2024 Saints were. Because if you go back, like everybody got hurt. That's why they all fell apart. Like their whole line collapsed. Derek Carr started picking up injuries. The receiving core all went out. Like by mid-season, they had nobody left who was good at football. That's why their offense went downhill. It wasn't because of like the league figuring them out or whatever. And I thought like that was a great offense, and they were so well coordinated, so well schemed that you should buy into this guy doing similar things with I would say Darnold's a little more talented than Carr, but like the gap isn't that big. in terms of their NFL careers. So, it was always believable that they could have an offensive leap. I actually think the offense has been more impressive than the defense through this point. There's been some
Oh,
injuries,
definitely.
right? Like the secondary, I think they're getting a lot of those guys back, and I do like them at 3 this weekend on Monday night. But um, they're just well coached on both
Yeah.
sides of the ball with McDonald and with Kubiak. So that raises their floor very high to be like competitive with those top teams. Even if I don't think like if there was a football game tomorrow and Seattle was playing one of the top dogs in the NFC and it was a pick 'em, like I don't think I would take Seattle.
That's fair. No, that's totally fair. And Houston, by the way, Seattle -3 on Monday is my best bet of the year so far. It's
Oh,
literally
you like Seattle?
I haven't had a side I've liked so much. And my other favorite bet of the year was probably when Tampa was against Houston on Monday night as well, and they ended up hitting that, but it was
Dramatic
a
win for the
sweat for
Bucs.
sure. That was
Yeah.
that was a sweat. I think this is a beatdown spot for Seattle on Monday night. I'm also really low on Houston. I think I feel like people are kind of overrating what's happened the last couple weeks and like, oh, Houston's back on track, and I'm not quite so sure that O line is going to hold up once we see like a real defense. But you mentioned the offense being more impressive than the defense, and I agree. But I do think Seattle has something similar to what you mentioned with Green Bay, where Green Bay had that one defensive result against Dallas. I think Seattle's a little bit similar with Tampa. You take that 38 out that Tampa dropped, it's 17 to San Fran, 17 to Pittsburgh, 13 to New Orleans, 20 to Arizona, 12 to Jacksonville. Especially last week, that Jacksonville game, I was really impressed by the defense in that one. You could argue that maybe had more to do with Trevor and the offense with Jacksonville, but I'm really buying in on Seattle. But yeah, I guess I'll lead it this way. I gave you my best bet of the week so far this week for with Seattle. What are you kind of eyeing up on the board that is kind of your favorite spread out there?
I got a couple. I mean, I do like Dallas. Now the line is flipped here. I mean, they were dogs all week, 2.5, 1.5, 2.5, 1.5. It was bouncing back and forth. They flipped now. They're basically pick them, almost borderline favored against Washington. I don't like the way the injury situation is trending at all for Washington, with McLaurin probably out and Debo potentially out. This offense has just lost a step here. The offensive line has not been as sharp. Everybody who talks football, who does analytics and can look through like data, came to the same conclusion about the Commanders, including the betting markets. I mean, they won 12 games last year, and the betting markets were like, "Yep, total's 9.5." Schedule's a lot tougher this year, and Daniels I think he's been fine up and down. He hasn't been able to get into a rhythm because he hasn't been able to stay healthy. But you're just seeing, the mistakes that just didn't exist in that offense have come into fruition, and it gets to a lot of things, right? Offensive line has not been as sharp. They have not had a healthy Terry McLaurin at really any point this season with the holdout and then the hammy. And so you're looking around like, all right, this is just not that talented of a skill group. They don't really put fear in teams. And now they're going on the road to Dallas, where look, like Dallas for 2, 3, 4 years now on that home turf, like basically nobody stops them. So you can put up some great defenses, including the Green Bay Packers, who have just gotten absolutely torched. And Pickens, and now Lamb is back, and he's going to be in the slot. Washington has major problems with giving up big plays. And even the Dallas run game, I think they'll be able to find success here too. They've had a much improved run game this year. So I like all the matchups for Dallas here. Special teams advantage, quarterback advantage, offensive advantage, and they're at home and they're only a pick 'em. So I know all the problems with Dallas's defense still exist. Washington may not punt, but I still like Dallas at home in that one.
I'm scarred by Dallas. I took the trap last week, and I knew it was a trap, but I thought I thought Carolina wouldn't be able to exploit that passing defense for Dallas, and they even were. If Carolina is able to do it, then pretty much anybody's going to be able to do it. But I totally hear your point on Washington's receivers being banged up. That really kind of hurts the attack against Dallas there. But besides Seattle, I think my other favorite bet on the board is in the London game. I think Puka's going to be a big absence for the Rams in this one. If you've watched, and watched any of the first 5 games before last week, he's been the entire motor of that offense and was on pace to, have a super historic season. And last week, even he missed some time of that game and then kind of came back in as a decoy, it felt like. But when he was out there, or when he was out of the game, it felt like the offense could not move nearly to the same degree we're used to, and not against a great team either. So I'm pretty skeptical about this Rams offense being able to kind of put a lot of points on the board without Puka on the field. I think Trevor and the Jags will be able to bounce back enough from last week and score enough to cover that +3. And I think if I'm guessing on who wins the game, I would actually take Jacksonville. Where are you at on the London game this week?
I would lean toward the Jags. I bet under in this one.
I
I
like
think it'd
that.
be a sloppy one. The Rams, it's weird. So like they made this whole big thing about how they're going to stay east, but then they spent the whole week in Baltimore. They're kind of getting to London late. They just
Hmm.
left yesterday, which is interesting to me. I mean, usually teams like to fly in early. The Jags, I know it's a new coaching staff, but they generally do have a lot of familiarity on that roster, at least, of making that trip. The residuals of that staff from the last era, would have some experience doing this trip before. But also, the Jags defensive coordinator, they've switched up the schematics entirely. I mean, they were man heavy last year. They couldn't tackle and couldn't cover. It was a disaster. They've gone much more zone this year, and the zone beater for the Rams, the story of the Rams really all year has been the man beater is Devontae and the zone beater is Puka. And they have torch zones all year. You could look at the Philly game, you could look at the Indy game, especially with Nakua, and he's number one in yards per route run against zones, but he's not in the picture for this game. And so you look around, and the run game for the Rams has been so up and down week to week. You really don't know which version of the run offense you're getting. I do suspect we see a heavy dose of run from LA in this game. I think they'll fancy their chances there because their O line's also not been great in pass pro, and Jacksonville's got a good pass rush now. So I think it all portends to an under for me. I don't really trust the Jags that much. I do think they've kind of benefited from a lot of turnover luck the last couple weeks, and then we all saw last week that when they didn't get those short fields, the offense was just kind of okay. I still don't think it's particularly in sync yet. So I did bet under 45 here, but yeah, I would lean with the Jags if I had to bet aside that one.
Then from early morning with a game I love to late night with a game I can't get a read on. And I feel like the number one team in football that I just don't understand, and maybe is like the story of the season, is the Atlanta Falcons,
Mm.
which, 30-0 to Carolina. And then you come out and you beat the Buffalo Bills, who I think both of us still take pretty seriously. And sitting here at 3-2, they had the early bye, so it takes away like a week of, data we could have on them. I don't know if I've ever known less about a team going into week 7 than the Falcons. I feel like I really just don't know what to expect. You could tell me that they finish this year 7-10 and Penix kind of has a rough year. You could tell me that they finish 10-7, 11-6 and sneak into a wild card maybe. And Penix is kind of one of the stories down the stretch here. Or, Bijan, has the Saquon MVP buzz that he had last year. What do you expect from Atlanta down the stretch here? And do you have a read on this game with San Fran being a slight favorite?
Yeah, so cousin Sal likes them, likes the Niners, and we're on them in the Ringer 107. So I'm rooting for the Niners.
Gotcha.
As far as a bet on this game, I did take over. I would lean with San Francisco certainly. I think it's a pretty bad spot for Atlanta, right? Coming off the massive win at home, everybody's like, oh, now they're looking at Atlanta a little more seriously. But the home road splits are real so far at this point. You get them away from indoors. I still think though, like this Niners defense is bottom of the barrel right now. Like I don't
Hmm.
think they can get any stops. I think if they get into a situation where Atlanta's able to move the ball, get the ball to their skill players, and then see if the Niners can tackle. Because I really don't know that they can. They can't generate pressure. I've talked about this on the Ringer Gambling Show on Monday. The Niners were like right around league average pressure rate first 3 games of the season with Bosa in the lineup. Since Bosa has left the lineup, they are dead last in pressure rate. It has been a complete just mutilation of their pass rush. They can't get anybody near any quarterbacks these days. And you go back to the last couple weeks, even that Rams game that they won. I mean, Matt Stafford was not really pressured or touched. He was just dropping back, getting 15 yards whenever he wanted. And the Bucks last week, I know they got to Baker a couple times, but it was not a very good defensive performance. And so you take out the 2 most important players on what I already thought was kind of an average defense, and you're left with one of the worst in the league. And I don't really know how that's fixable for San Francisco here, especially with a matchup against this Falcons team, which to their credit, like they've done a good job of just scheming up ways to get the ball to Bijan and Algier in space with blockers. And that's going to be a problem for this Niners team in this matchup. So I like the matchup for both offenses, really. I'm a little bit of a seller of all this helium on the Falcons defense. I know they finally found a pass rush, but I still have major questions about their back seven and coverage, especially. So I would look toward, I bet over here, and I would lean toward Niners, but I don't really trust their defense at all.
Yeah, Jordan Schultz, I think, had the tweet where it's like, we need to start mentioning the Falcons as elite. And I was like, I need a couple more weeks after a
Right.
30-0 loss to Carolina. Like, I need a little bit more space between that and losing by 30 to Carolina. But in terms of, I have to get you out of here on a couple Philly questions here, of course. And the Eagles are playing the Vikings this week, slight favorite on the road. And you could tell me where you lean in that game. But the bigger question, I guess I'll say, is I think, the Philly, you turn on WIP and you'll hear plenty of people who are plenty concerned about the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think that a lot of that concern is incredibly valid. The thing I keep telling myself to get me through the night as an Eagles fan, if you look at the wins the kind of the wins markets for the rest of the year, the Eagles are still at 10.5. Commanders are at 8.5. The Cowboys are down at 6.5, and the Giants are still at 5.5. If you go and look at that, Eagles are still -1, I think -160 last time I saw, to win the division. So for all the sky that does feel to be falling, is there some solace to take it for Eagles fans out there looking at some of those gambling lines, looking at everybody looks at the Eagles schedule and here in Philly, and we've all been reading it and like, oh my God, this is so hard. But if you go look at Washington's next 3 games, you go look at New York down the stretch, you go look at Dallas upcoming, it does feel like the NFC East in general just all got hammered on the schedule. So I don't think it's going to help one. I don't think it's going to especially hurt one team. Should Eagles fans be looking at those win totals, looking at that division market and being like, okay, maybe we're okay?
I wouldn't if I were an Eagles fan, because I mean, like, do I think they're going to win the division? Yes. But like, you guys are the defending Super Bowl champs. I mean, that's not the goal. Like, if they go to win the division and get bounced in the first round by Seattle or LA or Tampa or something, that's not like a good season by any stretch.
Of course.
And I think I thought the Eagles would take a step back this year, especially defensively. I didn't think it would be this drastic. I feel like a lot of people just expected the Eagles to just kind of like keep the buzzsaw going and just run teams over. And it's just like, that doesn't really happen in the NFL. I mean, look at even the Chiefs. For all the success they've had in these big playoff games, like, it hasn't always looked the same for them in regular seasons. Like, it's very hard to sustain the level that the Eagles got to. The most puzzling thing for me, and I think the most alarming thing, it's not even Kevin Patullo, it's not Jalen Hurts. It's just that what happened to this run game? Because Jeff Stoutland is still the run game coordinator for the Eagles. They brought back 4 of their 5 starters from last year's Super Bowl team. Saquon Barkley, he's still the running back. Why aren't they able to run the ball more consistently on early downs? Because at least last year when the Eagles were 2-2 and then they were 4-2 and everybody was like, remember that Browns game? It's like, man, this team stinks. It's like, what's going on here? And they were booing Sirianni at halftime. At least they were running the ball well. Like, the defense was still kind of coming together. It wasn't quite right yet. And the passing game really didn't feel right until the NFC Championship game. But they always had the one thing. It was like, we're going to be one of the best running teams in the NFL. We're going to dominate with our O-line, Jeff Stoutland, all that stuff. That's just not there. And until that changes, this offense is just very, 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 very limited because of the lack of sophistication in the passing game. The quarterback, I mean, Jalen Hurts isn't running anymore. His EPA on designed runs or scrambles is way down. And I'm not talking tush push. Take the tush push out of his efficiency. It's like through the floor. It's like, what happened to that part of it? Are they not scheming up enough runs for Jalen in the read option stuff and the RPO game? Like, they need to get him more involved for sure. Maybe they're trying to prevent him from taking hits. I don't know, but that's the main thing I see that's different from last year. Because yes, we all know Kevin Patullo, and to be honest, like, against Brian Flores' defense this weekend, it's a pretty awful matchup with the way they zone, the way they bring pressure from varying locations. I don't like the matchup at all. But they have to find, unless the run game gets fixed, this whole thing falls apart. Because for 4 years, even the first year, 2021, when the Eagles snuck into the playoffs and weren't a great team, they were one of the best running teams in the league. That is their bread and butter. If they don't have that, everything else is not going to work. So that's where I would be looking if I were an Eagles fan. I still think they could win the division at 9-8 because I think the division's pretty meh. But I don't know, if the Eagles go 9-8, win the East, and lose in the first round, I think a lot of people are going to be pretty pissed.
Yeah, I think in Philly, I think I would be happy if they maybe go 10-7, 11-6, find a way to win the division, and maybe down the stretches when you find yourself a little bit, the defense takes strides. Fangio, historically, you look at his defenses, they kind of always come together in November and December usually. So I think that's the hope, is that you kind of tread water here and the rest of the division struggles and you figure out a way to get in. And then once you're in, anything can happen when you have kind of the experience that the Eagles have. But I totally agree. It's the O-line, and everybody's going to make it just the O-line because nobody wants to say anything negative about Saquon. But it's just historic. You look at the 2,000-yard rushers, 7 of the 8 guys lost 800 plus yards the next year to their total. And if you look at all of the explosive rates on those running backs, they all went way, way down. I think it's one of those things where Saquon probably is a half step slower, doesn't have that same exact next level burst. Whereas you're on the field with these other NFL athletes on defense who are getting more athletic every year, and you're getting older every year, and you just had 7 billion carries last year,
True.
deep into February. And I think people want to put it on the O-line, Patullo. I think part of it does go on Saquon, which people don't want to hear. But another thing that people don't want to hear, my last question for you, Anthony. I saw your tweet last night about the Dodgers, and I wanted to switch over. You guys, you do the Philly special over with Shield. You guys were doing great stuff with the Phillies postseason. Wish it would have obviously went longer.
Both of us feel that way, yeah.
And even though Anthony's a Colts fan, Anthony is a Phils fan. But you had a great tweet, and it's watching what's happening with the Brewers has to make you feel a little bit better as a Phillies fan, of not wanting to totally tear everything down to the studs the way I think WIP callers and Phillies Twitter wanted to the morning after of Game 4. And I'll ask you to expound on that. But the thing that has kept me up at night when thinking about the way that the Phillies season could have changed, if you win 2 more games and you're the 1 seed, and you don't have to see the Dodgers until the NLCS after their pitchers already had to go in a 5-game series, and there's a little less off days. You probably can't throw Glasnow in a Game 1 in relief if you're planning on starting him later in the series. You probably get to way more of the bullpen in a 7-game series than a 5-game series. Everybody, I think, is focused on the wrong things. I think the focus should be they should have pushed for that 1 seed, and if they win 98, 99 games, I think you have a way, way better chance of beating that Dodgers team. And I think you look across baseball, and is there anybody who even has a chance to beat this Dodgers team, or
the Phillies
the best chance? Yeah.
Are the teams left?
Yeah.
I'd be pretty dubious. I don't think Seattle. I mean, it could be Seattle, right? Seattle's ahead 3-2. I don't think their starting pitching is good enough right now. I feel like their starting pitching in the second half really wasn't the reason that this whole thing worked. Their bullpen shored up. Their offense clearly got better with Suarez, with Naylor coming into the fold, with Raleigh being Raleigh. But
yeah,
I don't think their starting pitching is good enough. And we've seen Toronto really get to almost all their starters in this series. And I think that's a big problem, because you're just not, it's going to be really hard to match game for game, inning for inning with this starting rotation. And I felt before the playoffs, I said this on the Philly special during that series, before that series, I said that the NLDS is the World Series for me this year. And these are the 2 best teams. And, we'll see what happens. And to be honest, I know people are kind of dooming about it, and I get it, because you want to compare it to what happened last year. We all watched last year when the Phillies had terrible at bats. They basically choked to the Mets. They were not competitive against a pretty mediocre staff. The difference in quality of pitching that they have faced this year versus last year is night and day. It's drastic. And this lineup was so much deeper and better. And honestly, I thought they competed decently well. The top of the lineup, I know people are unhappy with, but I thought most of the bottom half of that group really put competitive at bats in. You're just facing Cy Young level stuff every night. It's really hard. And the margins on this series were so tight. And we want to take, it's one thing, small sample, right? Baseball, 162 games, to be 4 games where this team really wasn't at their best. It's one thing to say, okay, playoff baseball matters more. Yes, of course it does. We all agree that, these games are going to be the most scrutinized. But it's even crazier to literally go to 2 plays in a 4-game series, or 3 at-bats that were literally, an infield single where Trey Turner's throw was off by a couple feet, a bunt defensive play where you shouldn't have bunted. It was a mistake by Topper. And then in game 4, it was the 1 at bat where Duran, who hadn't walked a guy basically all year, walks Mookie Betts on a pitch that's 2 inches high, and then they score on a walk-off error. I mean, these are the tiniest of margins. So
even if you want to go back earlier, Sanchez getting screwed on that pitch that would have struck him out in the 7th.
Exactly.
And
all these little things.
And
of course, it sounds like sour grapes. I'm making excuses for the Phillies. I'm carrying their water. You can say all those things. That might be true, but it's the reality too. The Dodgers hit 199. The Phillies had a better average, scored more runs, hit more homers, outpitched them in the majority of the series, led for most of game 1,
shut down Shohei.
Shut down Shohei Ohtani, who's the greatest baseball player we've ever seen. So I just think it's crazy to want dramatic changes. There will be changes. There need to be changes. Absolutely. But this roster is kind of stuck, and like that was the bet they made 3 years ago when they made these longer term contracts. It's like, yeah, the core is kind of what it is. Castellanos will be gone. I think Bohm might be gone. But even already, they've turned over the staff. I mean, Sanchez and Luzardo were their two most important pitchers this year. You would not have said that about the 2024, 2023, or 2022 Phillies. So they've already made some small changes. There are things that are coming down the pike here. I think the best course of action is to bring back Schwarber and Real Muto, but they're really close. And I think the best path is to go again and hope that they miss a throw by a foot, or to get that big hit with 2 outs that really seemed to elude them the whole series. I don't think the Phillies, if they were, a 3 wins better, would have all of a sudden not made an error here or there. But you're right. Your point about the 7-game series is right. The Dodgers are much more gettable in the longer series because you have to see more of their bullpen.
Yeah, it's a shame that it played out the way it did, but it does feel like now we are entering an era where we're kind of relying on at least 2 or 3 of Painter, Miller, or Crawford to put it together and kind of be a quick contributor. But
that's how normal baseball teams do it. I mean, the Phillies have not had anybody really pop in the last couple of years. I guess you could count Sanchez in that, but they need to get more contributions from the farm. I mean, you look down the list of, look at Toronto this year, like the amount of breakouts they've gotten from random guys. Even the Dodgers, like Andy Pages hasn't hit in the playoffs, but like he came out of nowhere and it was a great bat for them and center fielder. There was a hole for them in the offseason. They plugged it with a farm guy. The Phillies have holes, no doubt, and they have the farm to potentially plug them, but that has to actually happen for us to, keep this competitive window alive.
There he is. He said it all. Anthony Dabbundo. Go check him out on Twitter at Anthony Dabbundo. Go check everything out he's doing over at The Ringer and Spotify, The Ringer Gambling Show. What time is that for the people, Anthony?
It drops around noon every day. We don't go live, so it's around noon each day.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Everybody go check that out. And Anthony does great stuff over there. So keep up the great work, Anthony. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah. I cannot emphasize enough how excited I am for this NFL slate this weekend. So it was great to have Anthony on the show to break everything down here. And now let's move on to the college football slate for Saturday. I usually come on here with a whole bunch of notes written down. Here's why. Here are the numbers for the over. Here are the numbers for the under. Here's all the sides. I'll tell you what, folks. It has been an insane week. I wanted to get that interview ready to go, and I focused a lot more on the NFL this week. So you're kind of getting some like harebrained college football picks here to finish out the show. We 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 college football picks coming up on the show here. But let's start off at 12 o'clock. Let's start off. Actually, I'm sorry. I skipped over what I wanted to say. Last night was my best bet. I absolutely hate on Fridays when I have my best bet before the Saturday radio show. I don't even get to get it out to the people. And my best bet was Louisville plus 14. We cashed the 3-unit bet on Louisville. They came through and won outright against the U down there. So I am all Jeff Brommed up. Everybody who has a big opening in college football should be looking at my guy, Jeff Brom, who is now 4-0 against AP top 5 opponents. So I think he's an absolute stud. I don't know if he would ever leave Louisville, but if he ever was willing to, he would be the guy to go get. But let's move on to the rest of the slate. We have Washington plus 5.5 at Michigan. That's my best bet of today. I don't love the college slate. I probably have 4 NFL picks that I like more than today's college slate. But at 12 o'clock, I've got Washington plus 5.5 at Michigan. Michigan was so disappointing last week, and I think we are a little too low on DeMond Williams in Washington coming into this game. I know that they disappointed against Ohio State. Everybody disappoints against Ohio State. They've only responded since then. They beat up on a Washington State team that gave Ole Miss problems. They beat Maryland in Maryland. They pummeled Rutgers. I think Washington's legit. I buy in on Washington more than I buy in on Michigan. I think Washington's a better team than Michigan. Give me the Huskies to get it done here, plus 5.5, and I think they win the game. Another game, 12:45, same spread. This line's down to plus 4.5. Actually, there's still a 5.5 out there over on FanDuel, so you can go grab that. Give me South Carolina plus 5.5. The Gamecocks Give me the Gamecocks over the Sooners. I think the Gamecocks win that game outright. You look at South Carolina, I think we're actually underrating them a little bit. I know that they lost to Missouri 2029. They covered that spread. I think that they actually hung in that game. I know they lost to Vandy 31-7. They were down, they were tied 7-7 until Sellers got hurt. They were tied 7-7 at halftime of that game. Then they pummel Kentucky. And then they stuck with LSU last week. I know that they lost 20-10. They stuck with LSU. So I think LSU, South Carolina at home here against an Oklahoma team, probably kind of looking ahead and looking back from that Texas game that they got smoked in. They got Ole Miss, Tennessee, Bama upcoming, and then you got Missouri, LSU. It is a brutal closing schedule for Oklahoma. So I think this is a look ahead spot a little bit for Oklahoma, but not for the Gamecocks. Give me South Carolina plus 5.5 at 3:30. Give me first half Ohio State minus 13.5 at Wisconsin. I would normally take the full spread, but I forget who it was that pointed it out, but they said Ryan Day and Luke Fickell are friends. Ryan Day might not want to run it up on him. I don't think that means that they won't get up early on him. So give me first half Ohio State minus 13.5. Another first half line at 6:30. Give me first half Oregon minus 9.5 at Rutgers at 6:30. And also give me the full game Oregon minus 17. Obvious bounce back spot for the Duckies, in my opinion. At 7 o'clock, we have the Texas Kentucky under at 44.5. The under has been 4-2 for Texas on the year. I think that this is a classic 20-10 SEC spot here, 12-point spread. I probably would go with Kentucky, honestly, lean on that spread, but give me the under at 44.5. And on the flip side, give me the over at 60.5. And actually, you can get it at 59.5. I bet it a little early, it appears, at 60.5. But you can get the over at 59.5 and USC Notre Dame, the fun stat that I give out every week. I love betting USC overs. The over is 39-19 in Lincoln Riley's games as the USC's coach. That is the best mark in the country. And my last bet on the college football slate for today at 7:45, I'm rolling with the Missouri Tigers on the money line at the Auburn Tigers. We got a little Tiger showdown there. Auburn has lost 3 in a row here in the SEC, and they've scored 17, 10, and 10. They are averaging just over 12 points per game in their SEC showdowns, and I don't know how much that changes. Jackson Arnold absolutely stinks. You have one of the best receivers in the country, and they can't get him the ball. Defense is solid for Auburn. I understand Missouri lost last week. I think this is a bounce back spot for Missouri. They fought down the stretch of that game as well to try to come back and win that game against Bama. They didn't just fold like a tent. I like the fight from this Missouri team, and I think they come out and they handle Auburn this week. Some of the games that I did not give a pick on, let's run through them. LSU at Vanderbilt at 12. I loved Vandy when they opened as a 3-point dog. Now that they're a 2.5-point favorite, I lean Vandy. I think Vandy wins the game. I'm a little worried that we've all just canceled LSU and kind of taken them out of the playoff in our heads and totally said that they're done and their year's over. Their schedule's brutal down the stretch, so I do understand that. They have not looked very impressive. I'm worried about this spot. I would take Vandy if you maybe make a pick, but I'm worried about the spot. Georgia Tech at Duke. Duke, a slight favorite. I would lean Duke there, even with Georgia Tech being undefeated. Baylor at TCU. TCU, a slight favorite. I would lean TCU. Arizona at Houston. This is a weird game. Don't have much of a lean on this one, to be honest. Weird game to be happening at noon. I lean towards the over. I could see that being a little bit of a shootout, close game. At 3:30, we've got probably the game of the day in Ole Miss at Georgia. And if I were to make a pick on that game, it's probably Georgia with how Ole Miss looked last week. And this is also one of those lines where Vegas is probably telling you something. So another game in the SEC, Texas A&M at Arkansas. A&M 7.5-point favorite. I would lean towards A&M there. Michigan State at Indiana. The over is set at 52.5 there. I would probably lean that way. Everybody knows I've been betting Michigan State overs all over the place, but it really died last week, so I'm taking a week off from that one. SMU Clemson, two playoff teams last year that have been incredibly disappointing. I would lean towards the under in this one, but not touching aside. 4 o'clock, Texas Tech at Arizona State. I would probably lean towards the over in this one at 50.5. At 4:15, Mississippi State at Florida. I would lean towards Mississippi State. Seems like Florida is firing Billy Napier either way. So I would lean toward Mississippi State being the more fired up team. 7 o'clock, Penn State, Iowa. I would lean Iowa, but I'm not betting it in case there is a dead coach bounce game for the Nittany Lions. Shout out James Franklin, who's going on College Game Day today, which is hilarious. At 7:30, Tennessee at Alabama. I would lean towards the over in that one there. I think it's set at 58.5. And then last but not least, the Holy War, 8 o'clock, where big noon kickoff is, Utah at BYU. I would lean towards the Utes there, but not going to bet against BYU at home in the Holy War. Let's turn it over and let's talk. Someone commented SMU Clemson underachievement fest. Yeah, those two, Penn State. I'm trying to think. There has to be another team. I guess you could say LSU. I think it's a little South Carolina. I think South Carolina. People were picking South Carolina to go to the playoffs. So Clemson, SMU, South Carolina, Penn State. Maybe you throw UNC in there. Maybe there's another team, and you get the all disappointment playoff. That would be a fun thing to put together. And Notre Dame loses today. They might be on that board too. But Notre Dame, USC. I will be at a function tonight. So I will not be able to be as locked in on that game as I'd like to be, which I am going to be a psycho if they lose that game and I'm in public. So hopefully that does not happen because Notre Dame needs to win this one. Last game on the books with USC. Rival, who knows if this is the last time we see them. I do not want to lose the last one, especially with all of the stakes, with it feeling like a virtual playoff game between the two teams. Whoever wins this game, it's going to feel pretty good about being in the playoff potentially. So I hope that is Notre Dame. And with the game happening in South Bend, I feel a little bit better about that being the case. But let's switch it over to the National Football League. Let's talk about my favorite plays. I already kind of talked about some of these with the Bundo, but at 9:30, I've got Jags +3 against the Rams for 4 units. I talked about why with Anthony. That's probably my second favorite, if we're counting Jalen Hurts touchdown, my third favorite play on the board. I have Jalen Hurts touchdown, yada, yada, yada. Eagles money line. I'm going with the Eagles, and I know Anthony talked about how the matchup with Brian Flores is a nightmare. The matchup with Flores is a nightmare, but not with the personnel on that defense. The personnel on that defense is not as good as the coaching on that defense is. And I think some games against bad teams, bad quarterbacks, bad offenses, you're able to thrive on that and get ahead of the scheme. But I think the Eagles, even with all their problems, will still be too good to just get ahead of on purely scheme. So good question from Forever Paddock here. This just popped on my feed. Assuming you're a Notre Dame guy, what do you think of the Marcus Freeman to Florida rumors? There was some Notre Dame beat writers out there that said kind of don't put any stock into Marcus leaving in general. It was more in relation to the Penn State rumors. But I'm not worried about Marcus leaving anywhere but Ohio State of the NFL, personally. I think there's if Ohio State ever comes open, they will hire Marcus Freeman. If Day goes to the NFL or he retires or whatever happens with Day, does media, that would be Freeman's job 100%. There's a time where it would have been up between Freeman and Fickle. Now that's Freeman's job, and if he wanted it, and I think he would want it. Besides that, I don't think Freeman's leaving Notre Dame, and that's not even me saying Notre Dame's the best job. I think Notre Dame's like a fringe top 10 job in college football. I'm just saying specifically with Marcus, I think he chose to be here before he even got the head coaching job, chose to come here as the DC. He could have taken different opportunities at different times. And I think he would have if he was going to leave Notre Dame for anywhere but Ohio State or the NFL. The NFL's I think you could say that for any college coach. It's always an alluring, less work probably than what you have to do in college, recruiting all these guys, or less annoying work. Maybe it's more about football. So I think you always have to leave that open with Day, with Freeman, with any of these top college names. But I don't look at Freeman as a guy that NFL teams are going to fall over themselves to hire. I feel like college guys who NFL teams fall over themselves to hire are generally like Chip Kelly types, where they're offensive geniuses and they can kind of bring their innovation from a different level to the upper level and kind of be ahead of the curve. I don't see that with Marcus. I see Marcus as just like a great football coach, great motivator, great leader of men. I don't know if that's exactly as much what the NFL cares about as much as college does. I think it matters more. I think Marcus is honestly much more accustomed to be a college coach, and part of that's coaching in college his whole career as a coach. But I'm not as worried about it as other Notre Dame fans are out there that have PTSD from Brian Kelly leaving. The other 1 o'clock bet that I have on the board, and my buddies are telling me I'm crazy for this one, and maybe I am. Give me the Miami Dolphins plus 2.5 at the Cleveland Browns for 1 unit. I get the weather, but Dylan Gabriel's the worst quarterback in football at taking advantage of that awful Miami secondary, I would say. I would say he has the least chance of making Miami pay for just how bad that secondary is. And they have a bad run deep too, so Judkins can go crazy, but I expect A-Chain to go crazy as well for Miami. So Miami's been a little punchier than I think people think recently. They're 1-5. Mike McDaniel, he wears the capris. We make fun of him. I get it, all the jokes. But you look at down like the last four, let's say last 5 games, honestly. You lose 33-27 to New England, a team that we now know is pretty darn good. You lose 31-21 to Buffalo in a game that was a one-possession game till the very end. You beat the Jets. You lose by 3 to Carolina in a game you were up the whole game and should have absolutely won. You lose by 2 to the Chargers in a game that you were up for much of the game and maybe could have won. So they've lost their last 4 games by single digits. 3 of those 4 by 6 or less. 2 of those by 3 or less. I think Miami is a little punchier than we think. And when it comes to Cleveland, I think all you need to be is punchy to win the game. So give me the Dolphins plus 2.5. I don't love betting the Dolphins here, but it's where we're at. Give me the Giants plus 7 at 425 at the Denver Broncos for 3 units. Give me the Packers minus 6.5 at the Arizona Cardinals for 1 unit. I think this is a beatdown spot for Green Bay to kind of remind people we are one of those top teams in the NFL, like Anthony had them ranked and like I have them ranked. So I think it's a big spot for Green Bay to kind of prove that wrong. By the way, you can't bet this. I bet it on Thursday and tweeted it out, but I had a Steelers, Bears, Packers teaser where now I have like Packers plus 3.5 and Bears plus 4.5. I would tease a Bears Packers down to, the money line. You want to get a Packers Bears money line ticket out there on a parlay. I like that as well. It's probably plus money. So I would take a look at that if you're out there on the market. I am disagreeing with Anthony on Washington plus 1.5 at Dallas. I'm going with Washington in that one. Jaden Daniels, I think, will make that Dallas defense pay. Monday Night Football, I'm going with the Tampa Bay Bucks plus 6 at Detroit. I feel like there's a high probability of me feeling stupid about making that bet. Detroit bounce back spot, Tampa letdown spot, all the injuries for Tampa, people coming back healthy for Detroit. But I just think 6 points is too many, and I think Tampa's just as good as Detroit. So I'm not willing to not bet the 6. I'm willing to feel stupid at 8 o'clock if that game goes one way. But one game that I don't think I will feel stupid on is my best bet, and it's the Seattle Seahawks minus 3 against the Houston Texans. The Seattle Seahawks, I think, are one of the best teams in the NFL, as I talked about with Anthony. So them being only a 3-point favorite at home against Houston, which basically thinks Vegas means Houston be favored if this game was in Houston. That, to me, is insane. I think Seattle is so much better than Houston. I'll be honest with you, folks. I set this line at 6. I thought this was going to be a 6, maybe 6.5 point spread in favor of the Seattle Seahawks. I'm only getting 3. I think most people look at that and go, oh, trap line. I don't think about gambling like that. So I'm laying these 3. It's my biggest bet of the NFL season on a side. I love Seattle on Monday night. I'll be staying up late when I'm in Charlotte to watch some Seattle-Houston late night action at 10 o'clock. Way too late. But game's going to be ending at 1:30, and I'll be there for it. The games, 5 games on the board that I do not have a bet on. The Las Vegas Raiders at the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs are minus 12.5. If you're going to bet that one, just tease the Chiefs down, I would say, and like a 10-point teaser, minus 125 on the hook. You get 2 other teams and throw them in there. Maybe Kansas City, Chicago, Green Bay. I think that probably makes some sense. Carolina at New York. This only being a 1.5-point spread tells you so much of what Vegas thinks about Carolina. I would lean Carolina, but there's no way I'm betting Carolina. Said Carolina way too many times there. New England at Tennessee. I would normally be on New England minus 7 here. Tennessee fired their coach. Not betting against the dead coach bounce game. That goes against my principles. Indy at the Chargers. I have maybe less of a read on this game than I've had on any game the entire season. The one stat I'll throw out there that I heard, Heed the Call, said that the Chargers are the number 1 defense at stopping play action pass. And the Colts run play action passes the most often in the NFL percentage-wise and are the best team at it in the NFL efficiency-wise. So good matchup for the Chargers defense. Jesse Minter, apparently that is a staple in his defensive scheme to be good against play action. So maybe a bad matchup potentially for Steichen and the Colts. So just for that stat, I'll go with the Chargers if I'm making picks on every game. And then Atlanta at San Francisco. I guess I'll take Atlanta. That's another one. Like I said to Anthony, I have less of a read on Atlanta than any team in the NFL. So I guess I would take Atlanta. Atlanta's one of those teams that I think I've just been wrong on every time I've betted either side. So that's going to do it for Saturday morning spread. That actually, wait. Timeout. Wait, Kirby Smart. I was clapping. It wasn't a timeout. No, I'm joking. But if you look at my DFS lineup, I wanted to pull that up because this is maybe my favorite DFS lineup I've put together all year. Not to toot my own horn, but toot. Caleb Williams. I'm going with Caleb Williams against the New Orleans Saints, bottom 5 in fantasy points per game allowed to defenses. Going with two guys who were on the Chargers last year, and only one is now. J.K. Dobbins at running back for Denver going against the Giants defense. I think Denver's going to really run the ball a lot in that game to not get Bo killed against that pass rush. Kamani Vidal is a guy I'm going with. Really broke out last week for the Chargers. Seems to be the starter over Hassan Haskins. Going with him against the Colts. Tough matchup, but so cheap that I had to take advantage of it. My big buy this week is Justin Jefferson. Feels like he kills the Eagles. Besides that one game where Slay shut him down a couple years ago, feels like we're going to be seeing tweets like, "Oh, it could have been an Eagle." All that stuff with Justin Jefferson displayed us making the Super Bowl twice since he's been in the NFL. Rome Odunze, 6,600, pairing him up with Caleb Williams. That's a pretty easy reason there. My favorite DFS play of the week, Rashee Rice at 5,600. There's a chance this guy's an immediate number 1 wide receiver for fantasy. With all the buzz we heard about him in the training camp, he could be the number 1 wide receiver there for Kansas City right away. They're going against the Raiders defense, which gives up the 5th most points per game allowed in fantasy to wide receivers. So I expect they get their toy back in Kansas City. I think they're going to use all these different gadget plays and things they've been planning for Rashee Rice all off season. And I think it's going to be a heavy Rashee Rice game. Even if he doesn't play 90% of the snaps, even if he plays 50, 60% of the snaps, I think a lot of those snaps are going to be designed for him. Another great value, tight end Dallas Goedert is actually 2nd in fantasy points per game at tight end this year. He has been fantastic. And he's going against a bottom 10 defense in fantasy points per game allowed to tight ends in the Minnesota Vikings. And then this is where I'm twisted up a little bit. I have 2 options, folks. I might put out a poll. I could go with Quinshon Judkins at the flex and do the Indianapolis Colts defense against the Chargers O-line that does not have great pieces on it right now. Or I could go with Stephon Diggs, a little cheaper flex option, and go with the Chicago Bears defense against the Saints offense. As of right now, I'm leaning Judkins Colts, and that would be my DFS, which would be Caleb, Dobbins, Vidal, Jefferson, Odunze, Rashee, Goddard, Judkins, Colts. And that's my DFS line. That's what I'm going with. I just talked through it myself. That's all I needed to do. But thanks for tuning in to Saturday Morning Spread. I believe episode 5 of Saturday Morning Spread. Thanks to Anthony Dabbundo for hopping on as a guest. Everybody check out his stuff over on The Ringer. And everybody check out next week's Saturday Morning Spread, where we do this all over again. So thanks for joining us. Saturday Morning Spread Country. Let's ride.